Hola, queridos aprendientes. Hello, dear learners. Bienvenidos al curso básico de lengua y cultura españolas. Welcome to the basic Spanish language and culture course. Mi nombre es Akshay Kale. Soy vuestro profesor de español para este curso en línea. My name is Akshay Kale. I'm your professor for this online Spanish course. Learning objectives. Los objetivos de aprendizaje. En este video vais a aprender a hablar de la frecuencia en el contexto de la rutina diaria, hablar de la secuencia en el contexto de la rutina diaria. In this video, you will learn to speak about frequency in the context of the daily routine and speak about sequencing in the context of the daily routine. Recap, repaso. Dear learners, in this video, we'll first do a quick recap of how to use reflexive verbs to describe the daily routine. Queridos aprendientes, en este video primero vamos a hacer un repaso rápido para ver cómo se usan los verbos reflexivos para describir la rutina diaria. Y también vamos a ver el uso de ciertas expresiones de frecuencia y de secuencia. We'll also learn about certain expressions used to describe sequencing and frequency of activities we carry out in this example, which we'll now analyze. So, Rafael es un chico español muy simpático y nos va a contar acerca de su día a día. Leamos y observemos. Rafael is a very nice boy who is going to tell us about his daily life, about his daily routine. Let's read and observe. Por la mañana me levanto a las 7:30. I get up at 7:30 in the morning. Primero me lavo la cara y después desayuno. Firstly, I wash my face and later, afterwards, I have breakfast. Después de desayunar, me ducho. After having breakfast, I take a shower. Luego me cepillo los dientes, me peino el pelo y al final me visto para ir a trabajar. Later, I brush my teeth, I comb my hair, and finally, I dress up to go to work. A las 9 en punto salgo de casa. I leave my house at 9 sharp. Porque a las 9:30 empiezo a trabajar. I start working at 9:30 in the morning. Dear students, please note 9:30 in the morning, a las 9:30 de la mañana. And also, por favor, también prestar atención a la expresión empezar a trabajar, ¿verdad? Empezar is to start. It's an irregular verb where, as you can see, the E in the stem, the A en la raíz cambia a EA, changes to EA. So you have empiezo and not empezo a trabajar. Empiezo a trabajar. The preposition a is also very important here, to start to work. In English it's start to work. In Spanish it is empezar a trabajar. A is a preposition. A es una preposición. Por eso usamos el infinitivo después de la preposición. ¿Vale? Usamos un verbo en infinitivo. We use an infinitive verb after the preposition. So it is empezar a trabajar. Empiezo a trabajar. Suelo comer a las 2 de la tarde. Suelo comer a las 2 de la tarde. I usually have lunch at 2 in the afternoon. As you have seen, a las 2 de la tarde, 2 in the afternoon. In Spanish, tarde is both evening as well as afternoon. Here it will be the afternoon according to the context. And suelo comer, I usually eat. Y a las 8 de la noche termino de trabajar. I finish working at 8 in the night. Now, dear students, please make a note here. At 8 in the night, a las 8 de la noche, and termino de trabajar. Right? Here the verb is terminar, terminar de trabajar. It is the opposite of empezar a trabajar. Right? to finish working. Termino de trabajar. Again, we see the preposition de, vemos la preposición de, y después de la preposición vemos que se usa un verbo en infinitivo. ¿Vale? An infinitive verb is used after the preposition de. This is also evident in the following sentence. Antes de volver a casa, normalmente doy un paseo por el parque o voy a nadar. Before going back home, antes de volver a casa, normalmente, usually, I take a walk in the park or I go swimming. To take a walk is dar un paseo, right? It's not tomar un paseo. Tomar is to take, but we don't say tomar un paseo in Spanish. We say dar un paseo por el parque. ¿Vale? Voy a nadar. I go swimming. Voy a, again we see the preposition a and how we use the infinitive verb after the preposition. Voy a nadar, ir a nadar. Right? So, voy and doy are both irregular verbs. Mi familia y yo cenamos bastante tarde, a las 10:30 de la noche. My family and I have dinner quite late at 10:30 in the night. Right? Vemos la tele, we watch television. Ver la tele in Spanish is to watch television. Right? Vemos la tele y por último yo me acuesto a medianoche. We watch television and finally I go to bed at midnight. Again, pay attention to the prepositions a medianoche, right? A medianoche, at midnight. Not de medianoche or por la medianoche or whatever it is. It is a medianoche, at midnight. Now, while telling about his daily routine, Raphael uses certain words to link and organize the story together, to link and organize his anecdote, right? So, which words does he use? Dear students, queridos aprendientes, ¿podéis identificar estas palabras? Can you identify these words? These words are primero, right? Firstly, después. Después is afterwards, and después de desayunar, after having breakfast. Luego is later. Al final, finally. Just like por último, when we're talking about the end of the day, right? Por último, último is last, at the very end of the day. So these words are very useful and are extremely useful for talking about the daily routine, right? About the structure of the sequence of actions, and these are words which we use on a regular basis. We can also observe that when there is an infinitive form of the verb, we use después de or antes de. For example, por ejemplo, después de desayunar, after having breakfast. Antes de volver, before coming back, before returning. Volver is to return, before returning home, antes de volver a casa. Frequency. Now, let's pay attention to some of the expressions that are used to make reference to how often we do certain activities. This, dear students, queridos aprendientes, es un tema muy importante porque es algo que preguntamos casi todos los días. Es algo que comentamos casi todos los días, right? It's a thing that we ask around, we ask our friends, and we also talk about it a lot, about how often we carry out things which we like to do or things or activities which constitute our life. Let's look at these expressions now of frequency. Todos los días, every day. Todos los veranos, every summer. Pay attention to this agreement of adjective and noun and article. Todos los veranos, todos los domingos, todos los lunes, because these are all masculine plural nouns, right? Please make a note, it is todos los días and not todas las días, because it is el día and not la día, right? So, todos los días, every day. Todos los veranos, every summer. Todos los domingos, every Sunday. Todos los lunes, every Monday. Similarly, todas las semanas, every week. Todas las tardes, todas las noches, todas las mañanas. Again, please pay attention, por favor, queridos aprendientes, prestad atención a la concordancia entre el adjetivo, entre el artículo determinado en este caso y el sustantivo. Todas las semanas, every week, todas las tardes, every afternoon, every evening, todas las noches, every night, todas las mañanas, every morning, right? Cada día, each, cada es each, cada día, each day, cada día, cada verano, cada domingo, cada semana, cada tarde, cada noche. So, cada doesn't change, so it would be cada día, each day, cada verano, each summer, cada domingo, each Sunday, cada semana, each week, cada tarde, each evening, or each afternoon, as we have seen, cada noche, each night. Note, por favor, ojo, note that todos los y todas las are followed by a masculine or feminine noun respectively, and always in plural, while cada is followed by both masculine and feminine nouns, but is always in singular. ¿Con qué frecuencia te cortas el pelo? Queridos aprendientes, ¿qué significa eso? With how often or with what frequency do you cut your hair? Again, in this question, I would like to point out the use of the verb, the reflexive verb cortarse el pelo, right? It's not, you can't just say con qué frecuencia cortas el pelo. It is con qué frecuencia te cortas el pelo, right? So, te cortarse el pelo. Again, the use of the determinate article or the definite article, al artículo determinado, el pelo, el artículo determinado masculino singular. The masculine singular article is very important here, right? So what question do we use while talking about the frequency with which we carry out our daily activities? We simply ask, por ejemplo, ¿con qué frecuencia vas al cine? How often do you go to the cinema? ¿Con qué frecuencia vas al teatro? With what frequency do you, or how often do you go to the theater, right? O con qué frecuencia vas al gimnasio? ¿Con qué frecuencia haces deporte? How often do you exercise, or how often do you do sports, right? So these are the questions. This is the question which we use, right? Now let's talk about these expressions of frequency, right? There are many expressions of frequency, and these are the most common ones, the widely used ones. Siempre, as you can see there, 100%, right? 100%. Siempre would be always. Similarly, todos los días would be every day. So, voy al gimnasio todos los días. I go to the gym every day. Siempre tomo café después de cenar. I always have coffee after having dinner. Now, you can see here 90 to 95%, the frequency dwindles a little bit, it reduces a little bit. So, it is now between 90, entre 90 y 95%, ¿vale? Entonces, cambian las expresiones de frecuencia. ¿Cuáles son estas expresiones de frecuencia? Casi siempre, casi todos los días. Casi siempre is almost always. Casi is almost, right? So, casi siempre, almost always. Casi todos los días, almost every day. Casi siempre, desayuno en casa. I almost always have breakfast at home. Casi todos los días, vuelvo a casa a las 7 de la tarde. Almost every day, I return home at 7 in the evening. Right? As you have seen, dear students, this is very typical of Spanish culture. 7 de la tarde is 7 in the evening, although here in India we would mostly say 7 de la noche, right? 7 in the night. Now the frequency goes on reducing, right? 80%. And then we say 80%, right? 80%. and then we say normalmente or generalmente. Normalmente, as I said earlier, usually or generally. Generalmente would be generally. Note the pronunciation, it is not generalmente. ¿Vale, chicos? No es generalmente, se dice generalmente. ¿Vale? Entonces, normalmente tomo café 2 veces al día. I normally have coffee twice a day, right? 2 veces al día. Generalmente duermo 7 horas al día. Generally, I sleep 7 hours a day. Now, 50%, now you can see that it's not as frequent, right? Then what do we use? Then we use a veces, sometimes. You can also say algunas veces, although a veces is definitely more common and used more widely, right? So, a veces voy de compras con mi madre, right? At times or sometimes I go shopping with my mother. Again, ir de compras. Please make note of this expression and the preposition de in this particular expression. Now you can see that the frequency has reduced substantially to 30%, and when for an activity which we don't carry out with that much frequency, which we don't carry out that often, the expression which we use is de vez en cuando, right? Now and then. De vez en cuando tomo el taxi, pero me gusta caminar al trabajo. Now and then I take a taxi but I like to walk to work, right? Again, pay attention to the noun caminar al trabajo, a más el, al trabajo, caminar al trabajo, right? Because it's a trabajo here is a masculine noun and denotes the workplace. De vez en cuando, now and then. Now we come to activities which we almost never do, right? Casi nunca, activities which we might do with the 10% frequency, right? Casi nunca llego tarde al trabajo. I almost never reach late to work. Now, I don't know whether this is true or not, but well, it's true in my case, right? Casi nunca llego tarde al trabajo. I almost never am late for work. 0%. Actividades que hacemos nunca, que no hacemos nunca o jamás. Actividades que no hacemos nunca o jamás. Nunca o jamás, los dos significan never. ¿Vale, chicos? Queridos aprendientes, dear learners, nunca and jamás both mean never. No voy nunca al zoo. No me gusta nada. No voy nunca al zoo. I never ever go to the zoo. I don't like it at all. No me gusta nada. Look at the double negation in Spanish. No me gusta nada and also no voy nunca al zoo. Right? So we can't just say voy nunca al zoo. I never go to the zoo is no voy nunca al zoo. And also pay attention to the pronunciation of zoo. In Spanish it's so, although it's written the same way in English, it's not pronounced as zoo or su, it is pronounced as so. Jamás veo la tele por la noche. I never watch television at night. Right? Jamás veo or nunca veo. Here you can also use nunca instead of jamás. Jamás veo la tele por la noche. Again, pay attention, ojo, prestar atención, chicos, queridos aprendientes. La doble negación, which I've already talked about. Double negation, las expresiones en negación. If nunca appears before the verb, nunca más verbo, then we don't need to use no. For example, nunca voy al gimnasio. I never go to the gym. Nunca bebo vino. I never drink wine. Here nunca appears before the conjugated verb, which is in this case bebo, beber or voy, ir, right? La doble negación. If nunca appears after the verb, after the conjugated verb, then we do have to use no before the verb. So it is no más verbo más nunca. No plus verb plus nunca, right? So it would be no voy al gimnasio nunca. I never go to the gym. Or no bebo vino nunca. The double negation is obviously a little more emphatic, but you can use both options, dear students. What you cannot say is nunca, yo bebo vino nunca. No, no bebo vino nunca. O nunca bebo vino. Now, dear students, let's practice what we have learned so far regarding these expressions of frequency and sequencing. For example, ¿con qué frecuencia juegas al tenis? Dear students, what is your answer? My answer is alguna vez o a veces juego al tenis. Again, pay attention to the preposition a and the construction al tenis, jugar al tenis. ¿Con qué frecuencia vas en bici? Pay attention to the preposition ir en bici. Prestar atención. ¿Con qué frecuencia vas en bici? Pues yo siempre voy en bici. Me encanta el ciclismo, ¿no? Y me encanta, I love it. Me encanta ir en bici. Me encanta el ciclismo. I love cycling. Siempre voy en bici. I always go. I always ride the bike or I always go around in a bicycle. Again, pay attention to siempre voy. These expressions are used before the conjugated verb, right? Voy al cine habitualmente. Voy al cine todos los días o nunca voy al cine. Queridos aprendientes, what do you think is the question now? The question would obviously be, ¿con qué frecuencia vas al cine? Pues yo voy al cine habitualmente. Habitualmente is like normalmente. I usually go to the cine. I usually go to the cinema hall, right? Voy al cine habitualmente. You can also say voy al cine a menudo. A menudo means often. ¿Con qué frecuencia comes pizza? Pues yo como pizza algunas veces. Well, I'm lying because I actually eat pizza quite often, right? Como pizza a menudo. ¿Con qué frecuencia vais a la playa? Pues vamos a la playa pocas veces, ¿no? Porque estamos en Delhi, ¿no? Desgraciadamente, unfortunately, we are in Delhi and we go to the beach rarely. I mean, we don't go that often, right? Vamos a la playa pocas veces. Please make note, dear students, pocas veces. Vez is rarely. Vez here is time because we also say, for example, una vez would be once, dos veces would be twice, right? We don't say pocos tiempos or pocas horas. We say pocas veces, right? Now we talk about the sequence a little bit. What is the sequence here, queridos estudiantes? What is the correct answer? Antes de desayunar, me cepillo los dientes o me cepillo los dientes después de desayunar. The correct answer is antes de desayunar, me cepillo los dientes. Before having breakfast, I brush my teeth. What is the correct sequence here? ¿Cuál es la secuencia correcta? Me visto antes de maquillarme. I get dressed before putting on makeup. Or después de maquillarme me visto. I dress up after putting on makeup. So the correct answer would obviously be after putting on makeup, I get dressed. Antes, después, primero, luego, finalmente. ¿Cómo podéis ordenar estas expresiones? How can you order the daily routine? ¿Cómo podéis ordenar el día a día usando estas expresiones? Pues primero vuelvo a casa, luego veo la televisión, después ceno, antes de acostarme leo un rato, finalmente o al final me duermo. Queridos aprendientes, por favor tomad nota, prestad atención, finalmente y al final es igual, ¿no? Finalmente al final in this particular context mean the same. So firstly I come back home, I return home, vuelvo a la casa, luego veo la televisión, later I watch television, afterwards, just después, only después means afterwards, and después de is after doing something, right? For example, después de leer el periódico, after reading the newspaper. But here it is just después, which means afterwards. Antes de acostarme, leo un rato. Before going to bed, I read a bit. Finalmente o al final, me duermo. Finally, I go to sleep. Resumen de la sesión, the summary of the session. Dear learners, in today's session, we have learned how to express sequencing and frequency while talking about the daily routine. We've also gone through the use of prepositions, right, in order to talk about the daily routine, and how the prepositions are also very important in this description. In the next session, what we'll do is we'll talk about the conjugation of verbs in the present tense, both regular as well as irregular verbs. Muchas gracias, queridos estudiantes. Thanks a lot, dear students.